Hello everybody, welcome to the John Show. My name is John, this is my show. And today we're back with another episode of Headcanon, where I try to explain how my brain fills in plot holes. Today's episode was inspired by the upcoming Fallout series that will be premiering on Amazon Prime next month. Fallout 3 and New Vegas are some of my favorite games and the two games that got me into the Fallout series. So I want to talk about them. More specifically, is the Lone Wanderer the Courier? I was introduced to the Fallout series by a coworker who just said, "You gotta play these," and he handed me Fallout 3 and New Vegas to borrow until I was done with them. I'm pretty sure his girlfriend was mad at him. I didn't know about the Fallout games. I didn't even know that Fallout 3 wasn't the sequel to New Vegas. So I played Fallout 3 first. I have this weird thing I do where I sometimes, when faced with a series of games, will Star Wars them and just play them out of order. So I kind of actually thought that's what I was doing by starting with Fallout 3. That's neither here nor there. After a few days of getting into that Bethesda flow, I popped in New Vegas. If you play Bethesda games on console, at least for Xbox, you know what I mean by Bethesda flow. All of their games have the same or very similar controller layouts. For example, in just about every Bethesda game I've played, the B button brings up your menu. From Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim to opening up your Pip-Boy in Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4. Oddly, Starfield doesn't let you do that. You could even press the B button to bring up your menu in Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth. You made me bring up Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth. Let me rebind my B key, Todd Howard, you coward! Todd Coward! Anywho, I fell in love with those games and what lore I could find in-game. I'm a nerd, but I'm not a tech-savvy nerd. I didn't really do the internet for a long time. That is to say, I didn't understand the power of the internet to provide me with lore. So it wasn't until just a few years ago that I learned that the Courier isn't the Lone Wanderer. What? That can't be right. My Courier was the Lone Wanderer. But how? How could the Lone Wanderer be the Courier? Let me explain. I never owned a computer growing up, so I didn't play computer games. Having never played the original Fallouts by Interplay and Black Isle Studios, I wasn't aware of the naming conventions they used. The Vault Dweller, the Chosen One, the main characters of Fallout 1 and 2 respectively, named as such because one came from a vault, and the other chosen by their tribe as their champion and savior. So going into Fallout 3, my character wasn't the Lone Wanderer. I'm pretty sure his name was Buster Hyman. Same with my New Vegas character. He wasn't the Courier or Courier 6. He was Buster Hyman. That's the name I usually go with when I play a game for the first time. Side note, my first attempt at Starfield ended with me deleting it and starting over, and since Lynn and Barrett call you Dusty, I thought more people would, so I, named that character Dusty. Dusty Hyman. Last of the line of Hyman. So how does the Lone Wanderer get to the Mojave Wasteland from the Capital Wasteland? Well, like a wise man named Bobby Bass once said,
"Motherfucker, I walk."
There are many different roads the Lone Wanderer could have traveled to get across the country, but not all routes are created equal. The lore for the states between Washington, D.C. and California varies, and not all of it is consistent. I am choosing for the Courier's final destination to be Shady Sands, which I'm placing in the Darwin, California area, based on the maps of Fallout 1 and 2 cross-referenced with Google Maps, which is what I use to plan the trip. I'm going to track the journey in hours and days, not miles, because I wanted to prove that the Lone Wanderer could make it to Shady Sands, get a job as a courier, and have the adventures they are assumed to have done before the events of Fallout New Vegas, which takes place 4 years after the events of Fallout 3. I am also going to limit travel time to just 8 hours a day. I figured the Lone Wanderer would need a few hours for scavenging and finding shelter, not to mention the occasional fight against a raider or a Yao Guai or feral ghoul. So 8 hours of road time per day, probably an average of 6 hours of sleep. That leaves 10 hours to play with of either making up travel time, food and water sourcing, what have you. The first move would be to leave DC and head west across Virginia. Leaving from Project Purity at the Jefferson Memorial, the Lone Wanderer heads towards Roanoke, Virginia, passing by such places as Megaton and Andale on their way towards US Highway Route 11. It takes about 86 hours walking or 11 days to get there. Roanoke is close to West Virginia, close enough that the Lone Wanderer could come into contact with the Blue Ridge Caravan Company. The Blue Ridge Caravan Company appears in Fallout 76, their roots stretching back to before the Great War. The Blue Ridge Caravan Company rebuilt after the bombs fell and by 2102 have operations throughout the East Coast. Though they primarily move along the Blue Ridge Parkway, they do have dealings as far west as Kentucky. Even if they themselves still aren't around, their legacy confirms that trade routes exist, and this area is as good a place for the Lone Wanderer to link up with a caravan. For 1, safety in numbers, but 2, the knowledge that can be acquired by working with the caravans. Our Lone Wanderer isn't incapable, but they most certainly lack the skills for surviving deep into the wastelands. They come from a vault. They were thrust into the wasteland at 19 years old, only knowing how to shoot a BB gun. They learn how to survive in the capital wasteland, but there's also clean water there, there's electricity in some places, shelter and other people. Out in the middle of nowhere, you're going to need a different set of skills. So we're going to add 1 month of skill acquisition. So 41 days after leaving DC, we head to Memphis. Not much is known about Tennessee, but surely there are mutated animals, feral ghouls, and bands of raiders. According to a musician you can meet in Fallout 76, Nashville is still intact, and he compares the beauty of Appalachia with his hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. So we can assume Tennessee was spared from total annihilation. This is the second longest portion of the trip, taking 243 hours of walking time or 1 month of travel time. Avoiding the Midwest due to rumors of it being an irradiated dust bowl with mile-wide tornadoes, the Lone Wanderer heads west across Arkansas into Oklahoma, possibly coming across some of the vaults they learned about from reading the Vault Tech rejection letters that can be found in mailboxes back in DC. Heading through the Panhandle, they end up in Boise City, Oklahoma. This is the longest leg, taking 290 hours, or a little over 36 days. Leaving Boise City, the Lone Wanderer now makes his way to Mexican Hat, Utah. I did not name this place. From desert and high plains to the tips of the Rockies, this route takes us through New Mexico, Colorado, and into Utah. This is also where the Lone Wanderer will first begin to hear about Caesar's Legion, which have a foothold in all 3 states, though the Legion is concentrated in Arizona, especially in the area around the Hoover Dam. This part takes 190 hours, or about 24 days. Next, we head to St. George, Utah, but it's not a straight shot. In order to get there, the Lone Wanderer has to cross the Grand Canyon, going south a little into Arizona to get across through a shallower area, again, just skirting past Caesar's Legion. Going north to go around it would have added an entire day and a third extra travel time. As it is, it takes 104 hours of walk time, or just 13 days. From St. George, we head southwest via the Long 15, straight through New Vegas, down to Barstow, California, which is now the hub. Then we head north until you reach Shady Sands, again in the Darwin, California area. This last leg of our journey takes up 129 hours, or 16 days of walking. In total, it took the Lone Wanderer 1,042 hours of walking 8 hours a day. Adding the 30 days of caravan training, we're looking at just about 160 days to walk from Washington, D.C. to Shady Sands, New California. 5 months and 10 days. And that's under optimal conditions. So let's say, for sake of argument, 6 months. That leaves a minimum, given the amount of time for Fallout 3 and Broken Steel to also have taken place, 3 years for the Lone Wanderer to become a courier, travel the Big Circle, hit up New Reno, Vault City, Fort Abandoned, Circle Junction, and all the rest. But what about Ulysses? Now, Ulysses believes the Courier to be the same guy who delivered the device that detonated the underground warheads in the Divide, but that Courier is described as the same guy who helped build that community. A community that Ulysses states he was there to see it rise. I think Ulysses, which is a name he adopted after the destruction of the Divide, who is himself a Frumentari undercover as a courier, is that courier. And either through guilt or memory loss from being at the Divide during all the explosions, or maybe whatever happened to him at Big MT, Ulysses believes the courier, our courier, to be that person. But this is a different episode of Headcanon. Maybe. And this brings us to another point. Josh Sawyer, director and lead designer of Fallout New Vegas, has stated previously that the courier is not an amnesiac. Every instance of the courier asking about information they should know in-game is just a game mechanic used to allow new players unfamiliar with game lore to learn more about the world they find themselves in. Great! And I'm sure that makes sense from a game design aspect. But with all due respects to Josh Sawyer, a great game designer, but not a medical doctor. I checked. 12% of all traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs, are due to firearms. Gunshot wounds to the head cause an estimated 35% of all deaths attributed to TBI. Gunshot wounds to the head are fatal 90% of the time, most dying before reaching the hospital. For those that survive the initial trauma, about 50% die in the ER. About 50% of survivors will suffer from seizures and require anti-seizure medication. Gunshot wound to the head survivors need long-term rehabilitation and may not be able to get back to pre-injury function. These statistics come courtesy of the American Association of Neurological Surgeons. Being shot in the head sucks. Depending on the ballistics of the projectile, the size and weight of the bullet, distance from the target, and the speed of the projectile, you may get anywhere from a 2.5-inch hole to an entire chunk removed. Your brain is also solid, soft, but unyielding, meaning the bullet and the pressure wave in front of the bullet cause severe damage to the brain tissue, where the brain can't get out of the way of the trauma or absorb it like your internal organs can. Also, when a bullet penetrates your skull, it's going to throw bone chips into your brain as well, adding to the damage. And there's this. Doc Mitchell handing you a mirror and telling you he's not sure if he put it all back in the right place tells me you got fucked up. And when you're done with character creation, he says, well, I got most of it right anyways, stuff that matters. To me, implying that you survived, but he didn't put your face back the way it was supposed to. So anyone claiming they knew the courier before Benny shot them in the head is probably mistaking them for someone else. You just had a portion of your skull and brain removed. The fact that you were only down for a couple days indicates that you weren't hurt that bad, but you were shot point blank with a 9mm. If Benny is that bad of a shot, or the gun was of poor condition, then I could see how you survived without much harm, but he's not, and it isn't. So what then could have saved the courier's life? Stim packs. Now, I don't want to rehash multiple videos from other content creators here, but there are many videos on YouTube that explain the science behind stim packs. But essentially, stim packs are jam-packed full of all kinds of hormones and chemicals and proteins that trigger accelerated healing. They cannot repair broken limbs. Well, okay, they can, but you have to inject them directly into the damaged area, basically concentrating that stim pack into one small area. And you have to be conscious to inject them. And I am not aware of stim packs removing bullets or performing plastic surgery to repair a wonky face. So Doc Mitchell had to fix your face, pull the bits of lead out of your brain, which means the bullet broke up inside your skull, acting like buckshot on your brain tissue, stop the bleeding and swelling on your brain, and then stim packs were administered to accelerate your healing. And we're supposed to believe that no memory loss occurred? Sure. I'm not a doctor, but after everything I've read, after all the research, I can firmly conclude that some memory loss had to have occurred. Also, there will be many things that the courier will have to relearn, usually walking and talking, fine motor skills like using utensils to eat or the ability to write, but also other things like, say, the ability to use power armor, hence why the courier had to relearn the perk to use power armor, or why all of your skills were set back to level 1, because you're going to have to rehabilitate yourself. According to our friend the Mayo Clinic, most people who have had a significant brain injury will require rehabilitation. They may need to relearn basic skills such as walking or talking, but the goal is to improve their abilities to perform daily activities. Therapy usually begins in the hospital and continues at an inpatient rehabilitation unit, a residential treatment facility, or through outpatient services. The type and duration of rehabilitation is different for everyone depending on the severity of the brain injury and what part of the brain was injured. And here's a couple more holes that need to be filled. The courier tells Joshua Graham he's never heard of Christianity, or at the very least, Mormonism. It is possible that the lone wanderer never heard of Mormonism. Most churches don't even worry themselves with Mormons, let alone go in depth about them. And as far as Christianity is concerned, James never says Christianity. I don't even think he refers to them as Christians. He only references the Bible. And did they even own a Bible? Are there even Bibles in Fallout 3? And I'm talking about an actual Bible, not a burnt book at a pulpit. The courier asks the lonesome drifter if he's 17, implying that the courier was in Montana 17 years ago and sexually active. Or, since we know the lone wanderer's dad is not from Vault 101 and knows how to just up and leave, maybe James has left the vault in the past, with or without permission, and told the lone wanderer that they had been to Montana. I mean, going from living in a vault amongst other people to being in the open wasteland alone, one might reasonably assume that there's not a whole lot going on in other parts of the country. I mean, you meet someone from Montana where your single dad spent some time 17 years ago, yeah, you might want to ask some questions. Lastly, although there were no concrete details on the age of Benny, full name benzodiazepine, most sources state he was in his mid to late 30s. This most likely comes from comparisons with his real-life inspiration, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, a mobster from the 1930s and 40s, who was instrumental in the development of the Las Vegas Strip. With the Black Widow perk, a female courier can seduce Benny. Benny runs one of the best casinos in New Vegas, the Tops. He's the head of the chairman, one of the families that run New Vegas for Mr. House. He has his pick of the women around New Vegas. Even if he's a bit of a creep, no woman his age or older is going to get him off his game. But a 23-year-old courier with shapely legs and glutes from all that walking? Yeah, I can see why he'd drop his guard. I mean, what man wouldn't? So after leaving the capital wasteland, our lone wanderer heads west to leave behind the chaos that cost him his home, his family, and his life as he knew it. He meets caravanners that help him learn how to survive, how to navigate the trails and roads, and avoid the troubles along the way. Once leaving the Appalachians, he finds his walk across Tennessee to be uneventful, but allows him to hone his skills, becoming a better hunter and tracker. In Oklahoma, he hears rumors of red oaky centuria. Not sure what to make of it, but the local vault residents assure him those are just rumors. Heading through the Oklahoma Panhandle region, the lone wanderer then makes his way into Utah. While most of the southern part of the state is relatively untouched, the northern part around Salt Lake City is an irradiated hellhole. Continuing west, the lone wanderer snakes his way through Utah, Colorado, and Arizona, where they learn the rumors of Caesar's Legion are not only true, but the rumors don't do justice to the horrors the lone wanderer saw. Entire cities razed to the ground, crucified tribals littering the roads. This was far worse than the fighting force whispered about in Oklahoma. On the other side of Utah, the lone wanderer then heads south, down the Long 15 towards New Vegas. Its lights a beacon in the vast blackness of the Mojave Wasteland at night. But New Vegas isn't his destination, just a milestone along his path. Beyond Primm, beyond the mountains, lies his goal, the capital of the new California Republic, Shady Sands, the place where the lone wanderer becomes a courier. The courier that opened up the Mojave, the courier that was shot in the head over a poker chip, the courier that brought justice to the Mojave Wasteland. But that is just in my headcanon. Thank you very much for watching this third episode of Headcanon. I was actually going to do this and one other theory down the road a ways, but it kind of slipped my mind that the Fallout series was coming up. And I figured, why not tie the two together, right? So there we go. I appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos I make. If you like them, please. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. And otherwise, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. You take care now.